Searching for the answers they never found in life.
Some questions have no answers to find.
Why did he come? What was he trying to tell you?
He did explain later.
He explained over and over again. Each time he explained, it became more obscure.
It was probably very simple when you come right down to it. He wanted to have a talk.
A talk? With the enemy? In the middle of a war?
Margareta, my love, we were scarcely the enemy.
It was 1941.
Heisenberg was one of our oldest friends.
Heisenberg was German. We were Danes. We were under German occupation.
He put us in a difficult position, certainly.
I've never seen you as angry with anyone as you were with Heisenberg that night.
Not to disagree, but I believe I remained remarkably calm.
I know when you're angry.
It was as difficult for him as it was for us.
So why did he do it?
I doubt he ever really knew himself.
And he wasn't a friend. Not after that visit. That was the end of the famous friendship between Niels, Bohr, and Werner Heisenberg.
Now we're all dead and gone, yes. And there are only two things the world remembers about me. One is the uncertainty principle. The other is my mysterious visit to Niels Bohr in Copenhagen in 1941. Everyone understands uncertainty, or thinks he does. No one understands my trip to Copenhagen. Time and time again, I've explained it to Bohr himself, to Margareta, to interrogators and intelligence officers, to journalists and historians. Each time I've explained, the deeper the uncertainty had become. Well, I'll be happy to make one more attempt. Now we're all dead and gone. Now no one can be hurt, and no one can be betrayed.
I never entirely liked him, you know. Perhaps I can say that to you now.
Yes, you did. Of course you did. When he was here with us in the 20s, at the beach in Sicily with us and the boys, he was one of the family.
Something alien about him, even then.
Those bright, watchful eyes.
Too bright, too watchful.
So quick and eager.
Too quick, too eager.
He was a great physicist. I never changed my mind about that.
They were all good, all of the people who came to work with you in Copenhagen. We had some of the great pioneers in atomic physics here at one time or another.
The more I think back on it, the more I think Heisenberg is the greatest of them all.
So what was Bohr? He was the first of us all, the father of us all. Modern atomic physics began when he realized that quantum theory applied to matter as well as to energy. 1913. Everything we were doing was based on that great insight of his.
You think that he first came here to work with me in 1924.
I'd only just gotten my doctorate, and Bohr was the most famous atomic physicist in the world.
And in just over a year, he invented quantum mechanics.
It came out of his work with you.
Mostly out of what he'd been doing with Max Bohr and Pascal Jordan, didn't it? Another year or so, he got uncertainty.
And you'd done complementarity.
We argued them both out together.
We did most of our best work together.
Heisenberg usually led the way.
Bohr made sense of it all.
We operate like a business.
Chairman and managing director.
Father and son.
A family business.
Even though we had sons of our own.
We went on working together long after he ceased to be my assistant.
Long after I left Copenhagen in 1927. Long after I had a chair in a family of my own.
Then the Nazis came to power.
And it became more and more difficult. Until that day in 1941.
When it finished forever.
Yes. Why did he do it?
September 1941. For years I've had it down in my head as October.
September. The end of September.
Curious sort of diary memory is.
You open the pages and all the neat headings and tidy jottings dissolve around you.
You step through the pages and into the months and days themselves.
The past becomes the present inside our head.
September 1941. And at once, here I am, getting off the night train from Berlin with my friend Karl von Weizsäcker. 2 plain suits and raincoats amidst all the field gray bayonet uniforms, all the well-tailored black of the SS, the naval gold braid. In my bag, I have the text of a lecture I'm giving. In my head is another communication to be delivered. The lecture is on astrophysics. The text in my head is a more difficult one.
We obviously can't go to the lecture.
Not if he's giving it at the German Cultural Institute. It's a Nazi propaganda organization.
You must know what we feel about that.
Weizsäcker has been my John the Baptist and written to warn Bohr of my arrival.
He wants to see you?
I assume that's why he's come.
How can the actual meeting with Bohr be arranged?
He must have something remarkably important to say.
It has to seem natural. It has to be private.
You're not really thinking of inviting him to the house.
That's obviously what he's hoping.
Niels, they've occupied our country.
He is not they.
He is one of them.
First of all, there's an official visit to Bohr's workplace at the Institute for Theoretical Physics. with an awkward lunch at an old familiar canteen. No chance to talk to Bohr, of course.
It was a disaster. He made a very bad impression. Occupation of Denmark, unfortunate. Occupation of Poland, however, completely acceptable. Germany now certain to win the war.
Our tanks are almost at Moscow. What can stop us? Well, one thing, perhaps. One thing.
He knows he's being watched, of course. One must remember that. He has to be very careful about what he says.
Or he won't be allowed to travel abroad again.
My love, the Gestapo planted microphones inside his house. He told Goodschmidt when he went to America, the SS brought him in for interrogation in the basement of the Prince Albert Saucer.
And then they let him go again.
I wonder if they realized how difficult it was for me to arrange this trip. The humiliating appeals to the party, the demeaning efforts to have strings pulled by our friends in the Foreign Office.
How does he seem? Is he greatly changed?
A little older.
I still think of him as a boy.
He's nearly 40. A middle-aged professor, fast catching up with the rest of us.
Do you still want to invite him here?
Let's add up the arguments on either side in a reasonably scientific way. Firstly, Heisenberg is a friend.
Firstly, Heisenberg is a German.
A white Jew. That's what the Nazis called him. He taught relativity. They said it was Jewish physics. He could have mentioned Einstein by name, but he stuck with relativity in spite of the most hateful attacks.
All the real Jews have lost their jobs. He's still teaching.
He's still teaching relativity.
Still a professor at Leipzig.
At Leipzig, yes, not at Munich. They kept him out of the chair at Munich.
He could have been at Columbia.
Or Chicago. He had offers from both.
He wouldn't leave Germany.
He wants to be there to rebuild German science when Hitler goes. He told Goodschmidt.
And if he's being watched, everything he says will be reported on. Who he sees, what he says to them, what they say to him.
I carry my surveillance like an infectious disease. But then I happen to know that Bohr is also under surveillance.
And you know you're being watched yourself.
By the Gestapo.
Does he realize?
I've nothing to hide.
By our fellow Danes. It would be a great betrayal of all their trust in you if they thought you were collaborating.
Inviting an old friend to dinner is hardly collaborating.
It might appear to be collaborating.
Yes. It's put us in a difficult position.
I shall never forgive him.
He must have good reason. He must have very good reason.
This is going to be a deeply awkward occasion.
You won't talk about politics?
We'll stick to physics. I assume it's physics he wants to talk to me about.
I think you must also assume that you're not the only people who hear what's said in this house. If you want to speak privately, you better go out in the open air.
I shan't want to speak privately.
We'll go on another one of your walks together.
Shall I be able to suggest a walk?
I don't think we shall be going for any walks. Whatever he has to say, he can say where everyone can hear it.
Some new idea he wants to try out on you, perhaps?
But what could it be, though? Where are we off to next?
So now your curiosity is aroused in spite of everything.
So now here I am, walking towards the Bohr's house through the autumn twilight at Mount Carlsberg, followed presumably by my invisible shadow. What am I feeling? Fear, certainly.
He's done wrong, he's done right. And now the evening's come, and all he wants is to go home, and he's lost.
Silence.
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 And once again, the tiller slams over in the heavy sea. Christian is falling.
Once again, he struggles towards the light buoy.
Once again, I look up from my work, and there's Niels standing in the doorway silently watching me.
So Heisenberg, why did you come to Copenhagen in 1941? You were right to tell us about the fears you had. You didn't actually think I'd tell you whether the Americans were working on a bomb.
No.
You didn't actually think that I'd stop them.
No.
You were going back to work on that reactor whenever I said.
Yes.
So Heisenberg, why did you come?
Why have I come?
Let's start all over again. Another draft of the paper, and this time we shall get it right. This time we shall understand.
Maybe you'll even understand yourself.
After all, the workings of the atom are difficult to explain. Each time we tried, it became more and more obscure. But we got there in the end, however. So, another draft. Another draft!
Once again, I go through the evening in 1941. I crunch over the familiar gravel of the Bohr's front door and tug at the familiar bell. Fear, yes, and the sheer and helpless absurdity of some very bad news. But, yes, there's something else as well. I can almost see his face. Something good. Something bright and eager and hopeful.
I open the door.
And there he is. I see his eyes light up at the sky.
He's smiling his wary schoolboy smile.
I feel a moment of such consolation,
A flash of such pure gladness.
as if I'd come home after a long journey.
As if a long-lost child had suddenly appeared on the doorstep.
Suddenly I'm free of all the dark tangled currents in the water.
Christian is alive. Harold's still unborn.
The world is at peace again.
Look at them. Father and son, even just for a minute. Even now, we're all dead.
For a moment, yes. It's the 20s again.
And we can speak and understand each other the way we did then.
And from those two heads, the future will emerge. Which cities will survive and which will be destroyed? Who will live and who will die? Which world will go down into obliteration and which will triumph?
My dear Heisenberg.
My dear Bohr,
Come in, come in. So many things we think about at the same time. Our lives and our physics.
So many things that come into our heads out of nowhere.
Our private consolations. Our private agonies.
silence, and of course they're thinking about their children again.
The same bright things, the same dark things. Back and back they come.
Their 4 children living, and their 2 children dead.
Harold, lying alone in that ward.
She's thinking of Christian and Harold.
The 2 lost boys, Harold
All those years alone in that terrible war.
and Christian, the firstborn, the eldest son.
And once again, I see those same few moments that I see every day.
Those long moments in the water,
Those endless moments in the water.
when he's struggling towards the life buoy.
So near to touching it.
I'm at Tisvilda. I look up from my work and there's Niels standing in the doorway. He turns his head away and I know at once what's happened.
So near, so near. So slight a thing.
Again and again, the tiller slams over. Again and again.
Throughout history, we keep finding ourselves displaced. We keep exiling ourselves to the periphery of things. First, we turn ourselves into a mere adjunct of God's unknowable purposes, tiny figures kneeling in the great cathedrals of creation. Then, no sooner have we recovered ourselves in the Renaissance, no sooner has man become, as Protagoras proclaimed him, the measure of all things, and we're pushed aside again by the products of our own reasoning. We're dwarfed, as physicists build the grand new cathedrals for us to wonder at. The laws of classical mechanics that predate us from the beginning of eternity, that will survive us till eternity's end, and that exist whether we exist or not. Until we arrive at the 20th century, and suddenly we're forced to rise from our knees once again.
It starts with Einstein.
It starts with Einstein. He shows us that measurement, on which the whole possibility of science depends. Measurement is not an impersonal act that occurs with impartial universality. It is a human act carried out from a specific point of view in time and space from the particular viewpoint of one possible observer. Then here in Copenhagen in the mid-20s, we discovered that there is no precisely determinable objective universe. That the universe exists only through a series of approximations. That it can only be understood through our relationship with it. Only through the understanding lodged inside the human head.
So this man that you put at the center of the universe, is it you or is it Heisenberg?
Now, my love.
Yes, but it makes a difference.
Either of us. Both of us. Yourself. All of us.
If it's Heisenberg at the center of the universe, then the one bit of the universe that he can't see is Heisenberg. So it's no good asking him why he came to Copenhagen in 1941. He doesn't know.
You were 20 times over.
The one thing.
But Heisenberg, your mathematics. How could they have been so far out?
They weren't. As soon as I calculated it, I got it just about right.
As soon as you calculated it.
I gave everyone a seminar on it a week later. You can look it up!
You mean you hadn't calculated it before? You hadn't done the diffusion equation?
There was no need to.
No need to!
It had already been done.
Done by whom?
By Parent and Fugit in 1939.
By pairing fluid. But my dear Heisenberg, that was for natural uranium. Wheeler and I showed it was only the 235 that fission.
Your great paper, the basis of everything we did.
So you needed to calculate the fusion for pure 235.
Obviously.
And you didn't.
I didn't.
And that's why you were so reassuringly confident that you couldn't build a bomb until you had plutonium. Because you spent the entire war believing it would not take a few kilograms to do 235, but a ton or more. And to produce a ton in any feasible time
It required like 200 million separator units. It was plainly unimaginable.
If you realized that you only needed a few kilograms,
Even to produce a single kilogram would require 200,000 units.
but 200 million is one thing, 200,000 is another. You might have just possibly imagined sending up 200,000.
Just possibly.
The Americans did imagine it.
Because Otto Fleisch and Rudolf Perls actually did the calculation. They solved the diffusion equation.
Freisch was my old assistant,
Perls was my old pupil.
an Austrian and a German.
So, they should have been doing the work for us at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Instead, they were doing it for the University of Birmingham in England.
Because they were Jews.
There's something almost mathematically elegant about that.
They also started with pairing fluid
They also thought it would take tons. They also thought it was unimaginable.
until one day
They did the calculation.
they figured out just how fast the chain reaction would go.
And therefore, how little material you would actually need.
It said slightly over half a kilogram.
About the size of a tennis ball.
They were wrong, of course,
They were 100 times under.
which made it seem 100 times more possible than it actually was.
Whereas I left it seeming 20 times less imaginable.
So all your agonizing in Copenhagen about plutonium was beside the point. You could have built a bomb of 235 all the time.
Almost certainly not.
Just possibly, though.
Just possibly.
And that question you'd settle on long before you arrived in Copenhagen. Simply by failing to try the diffusion equation.
Such a tiny failure.
The consequences of that failure went branching out over the years, doubling and redoubling.
Until it was large enough to save a city. Which city? Any of the cities we never dropped the bomb on.
London. Presumably, if you hadn't in time. If the Americans had already entered the war and the Allies had started to liberate Europe, then
Who knows? Paris as well. Amsterdam. Perhaps Copenhagen.
So Heisenberg, why didn't you do it?
The question is why Fleisch and Perls did do it. It was a stupid waste of time. However much 235 it turned out to be, it was going to be plainly unimaginable.
Except that it wasn't.
Except that it wasn't.
So why?
I don't know! I don't know why I didn't do it. Because I didn't think of it. Because it never occurred to me. Because I assumed it wasn't worth doing.
Assume. Assume. You never assume things. That's how we got uncertainty in the first place, because you rejected our assumptions. You calculated, Heisenberg. You calculated everything. The first thing you did with the problem was the mathematics.
You should have been there to slow me down.
Yes. You wouldn't have gotten away with it if I'd been there standing over you.
Though in fact, you made exactly the same assumption. You thought there was no danger for the same reasons I did. Why didn't you calculate it?
Why didn't I do it?
Tell us why you didn't, and we'll know why I didn't.
It's obvious why I didn't.
Go on.
Because he wasn't trying to build a bomb.
Yes. Thank you. Because he wasn't trying to build a bomb. I imagine it was the same with me, that I wasn't trying to build a bomb. Thank you.
So you bluffed yourself. The way I did in poker with the straight I never had. But in that case,
Why did I come to Copenhagen? Yes, why did I come?
one more draft, yes? One final draft!
Why have I come? And once again, I go through that evening in 1941. I crunch over the familiar gravel and tug at the familiar belt buckle. Why have I come? I know perfectly well. I know so well that I've no need to ask myself. Until once again, their heavy front door opens.
He stands in the doorway, blinking in the flooding lights from the house. Until this instant, his thoughts have been everywhere and nowhere, like unobserved particles through all the slits of the diffraction grating simultaneously. Now they have to be observed and specified.
And at once, the clear purposes inside my head lose all definite shape. The light falls on them, and they scatter.
My dear Heisenberg.
My dear Bohr.
Come in, come in.
How difficult it is to see what's in front of one's eyes. All we have is the present, and the present endlessly dissolves into the past. Bohr has gone, even as I turn to see Margrethe.
Niels is right. You look older.
I believe you had some personal trouble.
And Margrethe slips into history even as I turn back to Bohr. How difficult it is still to catch a glimpse of what's behind one's eyes. Here I am, at the center of the universe, and all I can see are the two smiles that don't belong to me.
How is Elizabeth? How are the children?
Very well, they send their love, of course. I can feel a third smile in the room, very close to me. Is it the smile that I perhaps see in the mirror there? And is the awkward stranger wearing it in any way connected with this presence I feel in the room? This all-encompassing, unobserved presence?
I watch the two smiles in the room. One awkward and ingratiating. One rapidly slipping from incautious warmth into bare politeness. There's a third smile in the room, I know. Unchangingly courteous, I hope, and unchangingly guarded.
You've managed to get some skiing.
I look at Margrethe, and at once I can see what she sees and I can't. Myself. The smile vanishing from my face as poor Heisenberg blunders on.
I look at the two of them looking at me, and for a second I see what they see. Their importunate guest, stumbling from one crass and unwelcome thoughtfulness to the next.
I look at him, looking at me, anxiously, pleadingly, urging me back to the old days, and I see what he sees. And yes, now it comes. There's someone missing from the room. He sees me, he sees Margrethe. He doesn't see himself.